Hi, Facebook. Oh, sorry about that. Um, Give me a second. Well, I try to get Instagram going here, and we will get started. Live. Okay. Alrighty, we are live on Facebook and on Instagram. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to my Friday live Q&A. More like just a live talk about whatever topic I choose during the week. And today, I've been talking for a little while about going into what are the four main attachment styles and how each of them develop in childhood, or some of the ways that they develop, and then also going into some of the ways that we can approach treatment based on a person's attachment style. I wish I could pack it all into one live, but I'm not necessarily going to be going into what are the signs and symptoms of different attachment styles today. I probably will in a future live. But there is a really great resource if you want to look it up after this. And it is attachmentproject.com. And on that website, you can take the attachment quiz, and also it has a lot of information on what are the signs and symptoms of each main attachment style. But again, today I'm just going to go into, we're going to talk about the 3 pillars method, which was developed by Daniel P. Brown. And it's just an approach to therapy, approach to treatment of the various attachment styles. Then we're going to go into each attachment style, and for each attachment style, I'm going to go through what are the, like how that might develop in childhood, and also how that can be approached in treatment for that specific attachment style. So, just a quick little background about the 3 pillars method. And this is, like I said, developed by Daniel P. Brown. He is, I was just kind of looking up his bio a little bit so I could say a little bit about him. He is an associate clinical professor of psychology at Harvard Medical School. 24 books. You know, he's got quite a bit of things under his belt, but he developed the 3 pillars method treatment, and won the D. Pierre Janet Writing Award. The 3 pillars method, the main book for that, written by Daniel P. Brown and David S. Elliott, is called Attachment Disturbances in Adults, Treatment for Comprehensive Repair. Not that a layperson would be really interested in getting that book, but for any clinicians watching, definitely recommend that book. I did a training through attachmentproject.com that was taught by Daniel P. Brown. I do not think that training is live anymore. I don't know if they're planning on redoing it or so on, but I would definitely look out for trainings about the 3 pillars method or from Daniel P. Brown. So yeah, I really don't know about that. I think they have since like taken that training down. Like you can't purchase it anymore, which kind of stinks because I thought it was a really great training. Tons of information, basically an entire course on attachment styles and the three pillars method and how to use that in treatment. So, the three pillars method, the three pillars are ideal parent figure imagery. And this is using kind of a combination between imagery, narrative therapy, and a lot of asking the client to like close their eyes and imagine this imagery of an ideal parent figure. And this will make a little bit more sense when we get into how attachment styles form. But this ideal parent figure imagery reinforces metacognitive development based on attachment style, and we're reinforcing development of our narrative, of our conceptualizations of our parental figures in our mind and in our memory. And then the second pillar is metacognition. This is mentalization based therapies that guide people and teach people how to think deeply about their emotional states and about other people's experiences. And this will also start to make a little more sense when we talk about how we would use this for each attachment style. But basically, when we have a anything other than a very secure attachment style, there is some deficit there in how we think about our emotional states, our mental states, and how we conceptualize other people's experiences. And learning how to tap into that metacognition, practice it, basically building new neural networks around that skill. We're able to change the way people think about and relate to other people in their lives. And then the third pillar is collaborative behavior. So when there are attachment disturbances, attachment ruptures, there is almost always some sort of deficit in collaborative behavior. And this is either nonverbal collaborative behavior or verbal collaborative behavior. So nonverbal collaborative behaviors would be like eye contact, eye gaze, body language, gestures, and not matching other people's affect. So, yeah, there's just like a mismatch of one example would be there's a conversation going on between two people, and because that there's less collaborative behavior and more internalized metacognition, or no, that's not the right word. More internalized reactivity of emotional states, more internalized thought processes, and less. There's less of that metacognition of what the other person is experiencing, and there's you're more acting out your inner experience and your past experience. And so one person might be calm and the other person is very, very angry and over the top. Like, it doesn't make sense for the situation why that person is so angry and not matching the other person's affect about what's happening. I hope I explained that correctly. give me a 1 or thumbs up or something if that kind of makes sense. And then verbal collaborative behavior would be, well, verbal non-collaborative behavior would be wandering off topic, not being clear in your meaning or speech, or talking in circles, or avoiding topics. So those are the 3 pillars, and we're definitely going to get more in depth of how those would be used for each attachment style in treatment. So, the 4 main attachment styles, and you will hear these called different things depending on who you talk to. And each attachment style, there are 4. Secure is the baseline. Secure is attachment is what we want, is the ideal. That one doesn't really have other names, but the other 3 are anxious avoidant, which is also called dismissing attachment or dismissive attachment. So anxious avoidant or dismissive. And I kind of like to look at it as avoidant dismissive. It just is clearer in my mind, because it gets confusing, because we also have anxious preoccupied, or some people just say preoccupied, and there's another name for it, and it is, I should have wrote it down because it's escaping my memory. Dang it. Anxious preoccupied. Some people might just say anxious, I'm not sure. But so we have anxious preoccupied, and then we have disorganized attachment, which also has another name which is escaping me. But I think for the most part, present day, you will hear disorganized attachment, anxious preoccupied, and dismissive / anxious avoidant. So I'm not necessarily going to speak a whole lot on secure attachment today, but I am going to give a brief overview of what it means to be securely attached. So secure attachment is when you have a secure attachment to caregivers, and attachment style, someone's general attachment style is typically formed and solidified by the age of 2 or 3. Some places say 2, some say 3, mostly by 2, and then, we just have, we don't have the concrete evidence of when that's solidified, but by the age of 2 or 3. So we're talking about attachment ruptures or styles of attachment with your caregiver that are happening when you are very, very young. You are an infant and a very young toddler. And the 4 main things that are necessary for a secure attachment to take place, 5, did I say 4? 5 things are: 1, the child must feel safe and protected by the caregiver. Child must feel seen and understood and known by their caregiver. The child must feel comfort, soothing, and reassurance. And that is, for their emotional needs, their physical needs. The child must feel valued Um, and this goes along with developing a healthy self-esteem because they feel valued by their caregiver, and the child feels supported to explore. So their parent, they have enough sense of security with their parent to explore their world, but they also know that, they also feel safe enough to explore their world. So that's just a little bit about what a fully secure attachment looks like. And plenty of people, although a lot of people have insecure attachment style, um, a lot of people, and I should have looked up the exact percentages, and if you're interested in the percentages, I can look that up. Just shoot me a message, a comment, and I'll get that answer for you based on, what I can find in research. But I can't remember if it is the majority, but I think it's close to, like, I would say near half. I could be totally wrong, that have a secure attachment style. My bad for not looking that up before this. And then, so yeah, that's just a note about what is a secure attachment. And now we're going to go into each attachment style and how that may have developed in childhood. What are some of what we call the etiology, how it developed, how it plays out. And then we will look at what is the therapeutic stance that the 3 pillars takes for each attachment style, and then how we might approach that treatment through each of the pillars. So, starting with dismissive attachment or anxious avoidant attachment. Same thing. This is when parents of the child, or say we're talking about you, say you are anxious avoidant, or of the anxious avoidant person, the parents were not necessarily absent or neglectful, but tended to avoid the display of emotion and intimacy, and were often misattuned to the child's emotional needs. So this looks like, and this can be 2 degrees, obviously, but this can look like an emotionally unavailable parent or parents, and they're especially emotionally unavailable in highly emotional situations. So something happens, or the child is getting emotional, and the parent is unavailable for that. They're just not there to help the child deal with it. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to be emotional or show emotion. There's sometimes physical and emotional rejection of proximity and contact seeking. So the child feels emotional and reaches out early on for proximity to the parent, for some kind of security from the parent to help deal with their emotions, or seeks contact with the parent but is met with rejection. So eventually the child learns not to seek out proximity or contact with the parent. There could be rigid control, such as playing for the child, or assuming what the child needs and doing it for the child, rather than seeking to understand what the child needs or play with the child. There is selective misattunement of negative affect, and sometimes positive affect. So this is kind of the same thing, like sometimes the parent isn't attuned to the child's negative or sometimes even positive emotions. They don't like the child to express negative emotions, and sometimes they don't even like the child to express positive emotions. So they may even become angry, abusive, or just very disapproving of any displays of emotion. It might be just negative emotions, but it could be any type of display of emotion. The parent often expects the young child to behave independently, serious, and reserved. So they want the child to be able to handle themselves, handle their own emotions so that the parent doesn't have to. They want the child to be serious, and they want the child to be very reserved in their emotions. And because of all of this, the child learns to distance themselves from negative feeling states. This reinforces, there's reinforcement when the child is independent, even when the child even when the child's needs depend on the parent. So even though it's not developmentally appropriate for that child to care for their own needs, like they really need a parent to care for their needs, their emotional needs, and it can be physical needs, that the parent reinforces when that child just handles it themselves because they don't want to. And it's likely, not always, but it's likely that the parent has a similar attachment style. So it's likely that the parent grew up in a similar situation. Their parents or one of their parents was dismissing or anxious avoidant. And so they also have that attachment style, and it kind of plays itself out in families. So, what is the therapeutic stance? When somebody has a dismissing or anxious avoidant attachment style, they come into therapy and they're presenting with relational issues or trauma, or they want to work on attachment trauma, whatever that may be. If we can understand, if we can find out what the person's attachment style is, and we're pretty confident in that we are sure that that's their attachment style, how can we as therapists approach treatment, or how might your therapist approach treatment? So according to the 3 pillars method, therapy should take on active engagement. So typically an anxious avoidant or dismissing client will continually try to disengage emotionally from therapy. So similar to how they grew up, or their attachment style, it feels bad, it feels wrong, and it feels completely against everything in their being to show up emotionally in therapy, to show up with their needs. It requires of the therapist a careful, accurate attunement, especially to negative affect. So helping the client bring out an awareness of their negative states. So they may not even be very attuned themselves to what's going on within themselves. And so being able to kind of slowly label that, bring it out, and make it a little more comfortable to voice, make it okay to bring out in therapy is one of our goals. And then having a permissive encouragement of exploration of states of mind. So just making it 100% okay for the client to express themselves and do this in their own way. So never any judgment or even like being very mindful of micro expressions, being mindful of making this a completely safe space where they can express themselves in whatever way feels comfortable to express themselves. So going to the three pillars. In the ideal parent figure imagery, for the dismissing attachment style, anxious avoidant attachment style, we are looking to create imagery in the client's sort of memory bank in what they can call upon when they think about relations to other people as having an ideal parent figure that is deeply encouraging and accepting of the child's attachment expressions, physically affectionate, carefully attuned to the full range of that client's emotions or the expression of their emotions, and especially to the child's negative emotions and affect. That is contingently responsive to the child, open, flexible, and permissive, not controlling. An ideal parent figure that fosters safety in the attachment relationship and fosters exploration in the context of attachment relationships. So not independent of attachment. And it's kind of, I'm trying to figure out how to describe what the ideal parent figure imagery is. You are, there are scripts for this, but they really encourage clinicians to create their own scripts, sometimes even based on the client, each client that they're working with. But we are repetitively, so sometimes in each session or in various sessions, we are having the client close their eyes or, get comfortable, close their eyes, and going through an imagery session of what an ideal parent figure would be. And so we're creating a parent figure in the mind that is different than what they grew up with. So I hope that, I'm not sure if I explained that super clearly when we first started. So those are the imagery we would be looking to create for the dismissive / anxious avoidant attachment style. So often this attachment style, these clients will show up in therapy with a sadness and a longing, feeling a lot of shame for even having needs, for having attachment needs. And so a huge part of therapy is just normalizing that we all have attachment needs. Like we all have a need to be attached to other people. We all have emotional needs that can get met by other people because that just wasn't something that they learned as through their early life experiences. um, and then for collaboration, um, we are looking to so remember, for collaboration, we're looking at addressing non-collaborative nonverbal behavior and non-collaborative verbal behavior. So for non-collaborative verbal behavior, we're looking at helping the dismissive client become more descriptive of what's going on internally. We're addressing their sometimes tendency to not remember how they felt in a certain situation, so addressing kind of the lack of memory, and addressing idealization, which can happen. So sometimes people with this attachment style will idealize situations so that they don't have to really look at how they were actually feeling or their actual needs in that situation. So they may not have been showing up collaboratively in a relationship when it's very clear to the other person in the relationship that there's something going on internally, but the person with the dismissive attachment style is not expressing that. They're like, what are you talking about? Everything's fine. Like nothing happened. I'm fine. I'm not angry. It's that kind of non-collaborative behavior. And that can happen non-verbally as well, where they are not displaying their affect, and everything's extremely internalized, and we need to address their ability to be able to express that non-verbally. There also is probably, depending on the client, avoidant nonverbal behavior. So we talked about in the beginning, kind of eye gaze, not making eye contact, closed off nonverbal cues. So like, let's not deal with any of the emotions that are going on, and they show that in their body. Again, really helping these clients to identify their states of mind. So show that non-verbally and express that verbally. Looking beyond the information that they give you. So even they might show up in therapy and act like absolutely nothing is wrong. They do not have a negative state. And they're just not expressing that. So as a clinician, being able to look beyond that and understand there's a lot that they're not expressing, and helping them learn how to express that. Helping them really have marked I have it listed as marked affectivity. So this would be helping them really express their affect. So putting emphasis on, okay, they're like, yeah, I'm kind of angry today. Or they're explaining a situation and you're thinking to yourself, wow, that would really piss me off. And they're just like, eh. And kind of putting an emphasis and giving them the words to express that, like, you must have felt really, really angry, um, and continually helping them put words to their experience. Um, and then helping them gain a wider perspective, and a central guiding purpose. So helping them find, like, what are their goals relationally, what um, what are their values, like what is their purpose, and how they, how they can connect their want to change or their want to show up, with their emotions and be less avoidant to that purpose or to their goals. And then really focusing on like an interconnectedness. So that goes into the mentalization too, that um, the way that they were taught to show up with their attachment needs is, doesn't it doesn't mesh with having good relationships with people, right? So having a sense of interconnectedness with other people, that the way that you avoid, um, these things or show up in relationships is, affecting other people. And that, I don't know if I said, but that goes into the mentalization. Like, this is affecting other people, it's hurting other people, that kind of thing. So that's kind of all of my notes for the dismissive, um, avoidant attachment style. If you have any questions about that, just let me know in a comment or, a message, private message. So let's go on to anxious preoccupied attachment. And I'm going to just check Facebook here real quick. Just to see if I have everything going good. All right. Okay, sorry about that. Too many things going on with Instagram Live and Facebook Live, and on a different tab looking at my notes. So I just want to check everything's going smoothly. So let's go into anxious preoccupied attachment. Now, the etiology, as I said, is like, how does anxious preoccupied attachment develop? And this attachment style tends to develop when caregivers are sometimes attuned to the child's needs, but at other times they are misattuned to their needs. So, in essence, the child receives mixed signals about their relationship with their parent. The parent may seek emotional or physical closeness with the child in order to satisfy their own needs rather than the child's needs. So this may be, and with all of these is kind of the case, that the parent may have the attachment style that they are quote unquote passing on to the child. It's a relational pattern in many cases. So, essentially, the anxious parent, the parent may be very anxious and preoccupied with getting their needs met, and so they use the child in a sense. Not, this isn't usually conscious, but they use the child in a sense to satisfy their own needs, to lower their own anxiety, rather than being attuned to what the child needs emotionally or physically or mentally. um, uh, Also, the parent may appear intrusive or overprotective, again, in a way to mitigate their own anxieties and their own needs. They may use the child to satiate their own need for love rather than focusing on the child's needs. Kind of the same thing. Like, we can think of the I feel like we all can call up an image in our mind of a mother who had kids because she needed to feel loved, um, unfortunately. And they may use the child to present themselves in a certain light. So rather than really focusing on what the child needs, they may use the child to appear like the perfect parent or to appear good to other people. This causes the child typically to have an over involvement in the parent's state of mind. So the child learns to regulate their parent rather than their parent regulating them. So they learn that if I do this, or if I stay hyper vigilant about the state of mind of my caregiver, then I get my needs met, in a sense. This can also look like the parent being unresponsive to, like I said, they're sometimes responsive and sometimes unresponsive. And there may be a lot of multitasking of the parent. Like, instead of stopping what they're doing and attuning to their child's needs, they kind of always have something else going on. And yeah, they're kind of meeting their child's needs, but they are preoccupied themselves with other things also. Um, they are typically chronically under responsive to their child's emotional state. So the child could be very, very distressed, and parent is not attuned to that. But the child is attuned to when their parent is very distressed. And this can also look like selective misattunement to exploratory behavior. So the parents are somewhat clueless about the child's state of mind, and they're kind of, when I say misattunement to exploratory behavior, it's like, they're sometimes there to support the child in going out and exploring the world, and then other times they're preoccupied and the child is kind of left there to their own devices. It kind of goes along with the multitasking. Again, child has an over involvement with the mother's state of mind. I have mother written, but any of the primary caregiver. The child because of this, the child has a sustained hyper arousal. So they're like always on high alert of what is their parents' needs going to be next. And they have a poorly developed sense of self. So, because they're so preoccupied with the parents' state of mind, they aren't developing that sense of self that a secure attachment would be developing. They have an outside-in orientation, so this carries into adulthood. They are looking to the needs of other people, and they're preoccupied with the needs of their partner, their parents. They're just very preoccupied with what everyone else's needs are. They're chronic caretakers, and usually at the expense of their own needs. And this comes in degrees, but in general, we're talking about someone. I mean, essentially, we're describing a very codependent um, relationship. And sorry, I I just went internally to think like, am I using the right term in saying codependent? But I think we could say that anxious, preoccupied people are the most likely to be codependent. And again, parents were likely raised in a similar manner, or they had an anxious, preoccupied caregiver and are themselves have an anxious, preoccupied attachment style. So, what is our therapeutic stance when working with people with an anxious, preoccupied attachment style? So, during therapy, we want to have a consistent focus on that person's self experience, what is their experience, and what is the helping them have an inside out orientation, meaning what are their needs independent of everyone else, because remember, they are always worried about everyone else's needs, and especially in intimate relationships. And so, and they're typically not focusing on what are their needs, what is their experience, what are their feelings, emotions, how can they get their needs met. So consistently taking them back to what is their self experience. Helping them, they are typically pervasively attuned to everyone else, including the therapist. So helping them, not worry so much about what the therapist is thinking and feeling, but what they are thinking and feeling. Helping them, well, first, the therapist needs to have a consistent, calm presence. So this can also mean the therapist demonstrating a very secure presence, one that is not overly affective. So you're not overly affected by what the client brings up or what the client talks about, or so demonstrating that it's okay for them to attune to their own affect and their own needs, and that your affect is going to stay, or your presence is going to stay fairly calm and consistent. And then helping them, so attuning to their exploratory behavior. So this is attuning and being very present, holding a secure space for this client to explore themselves, the world, any expansion of their understanding of themselves and of the world. So you're kind of like, I mean, obviously as a therapist, you're not trying to become the parental figure, but you are trying to become, or at least demonstrate a secure way of being in the world with someone that they do not have to be overly attuned to. And in the ideal parent figures, with preoccupied clients, We are looking to create ideal parent figures that are very attuned to their inner child's internal state of mind, attuned to their emotional states. So when we're creating an ideal parent figure imagery, we're creating like, imagine a moment in your childhood when you were very distraught or very anxious, and your ideal parent figure stepping in and being very attuned to that and really taking care of your needs during that time. Allowing the child to be free and just be, and not be involved in worrying about the state of mind of that parent figure. Having an ideal parent figure that consistently attunes to the child's anxiety, providing the right response to reunion behaviors. So this would be creating an image of an ideal parent figure who is always joyous or excited to see the child, or accepts their reaching out for care, reaching out for their needs to be met. And then an ideal parent figure that repetitively fosters exploratory behavior and self-development. And then when we're looking at collaborative behaviors when working with preoccupied clients, we're looking at, first, clients with an anxious preoccupied attachment style will be very preoccupied about ruptures in treatment. So they will be very preoccupied with, is my therapist mad at me? Did I say something wrong? Did I upset them? This plays out in all of their relationships. So we want to put an emphasis on a team effort, a collaboration with the client in fixing any kind of ruptures. So if something happens in therapy that was upsetting to them, or that they feel like they upset you, or they feel like there's any kind of rupture in that therapeutic relationship, that it is a team effort, that we're gonna bring it up, we're gonna talk about it, and we're going to work through that together, rather than that client just sitting and ruminating on that. And they may take some certain things very personally, like you have to cancel an appointment because of the therapist has to cancel an appointment, or even in the case of the therapist needs to refer them to someone else, they're going to be very preoccupied with why that happened, ideas about you hating them, or just all that internal dialogue and mental states that happen because of their preoccupied style. Helping the client replace their outside-in orientation with a back and forth exchange, matching and redirecting hyperactivating nonverbal, non-collaborative behavior. So they may be having all these thoughts and all these anxieties about the therapeutic relationship, but not voicing those. So, like we talked about in the other attachment style, helping them put a voice to those and getting comfortable talking about those things with a therapist. And then, obviously, helping to move those skills outside of therapy. Because we have to remember that with anxious preoccupied, there's often a avoidance of conflict, or avoidance of bringing their needs to the table, because getting their needs met in childhood meant not bringing their needs up, but being preoccupied with the other person's needs, with the caregiver's needs. So helping them learn how to bring up their needs. With nonverbal behavior, this could be just acting in a very quiet, meek manner to not bring any kind of attention to their needs or any attention to the fact that they're experiencing something that, or not even really knowing what they're experiencing, but always knowing how the other person feels. Or, that's the wrong wording, not always knowing, but always being worried that they don't know how the other person feels as well. Sorry, lost my spot. Handling non-collaborative verbal exchanges, so turn taking and establishing rules of discourse for conversation, and then addressing when they are being irrelevant in conversation or wandering, or when they have passive speech, so helping them be more direct and not wandering off topic as much or bringing up irrelevant things in the conversation. And then ways we can enhance metacognition, or what we also call mentalization, in anxious preoccupied clients is by addressing marked affectivity, so helping them mentalize about their affect, or helping them verbalize that and think through it. Mentalization in helping them be aware of the organization, disorganization of their states of mind. We can establish rating scales about their organization of mind, and doing mentalization about past versus present, or self versus other orientation. So really starting to give them the understanding and the words to put to that, and have them mentalize, when they're talking about something, when they're thinking about something, or when they're experiencing some kind of affect, being aware, is this because of something in the past, or is this because of the present situation? Is this based on my own needs and my internalized self, or is this first on an outside, an other orientation? And a consistent focus on self-orientation, curiosity, and self-experience. And finally, I don't even know how long I have been on. I'm going to check Facebook here. I know this one seems a bit longer than my other ones because it's just a lot of information to get out. Okay. I mean, we're not doing too bad. We're at about an hour. of me talking. Um, but I want to get through disorganized attachment. So, the etiology, I like that word. But yeah, the how does disorganized attachment typically develop? And this develops when a child is frightened of their caregiver or experiences they experience their caregiver as frightening. So either they are abused by their caregiver, or, like their caregiver hurts them, scares them, hurts other people, which, makes them scared of their caregiver. So the child is in a chronic high fear arousal state. This can happen when their main caregiver has dissociated behavior, because of their own unresolved loss or trauma, and so they are severely disconnected from the child. And the child can also develop similar dissociative states, which, then translates to adulthood, to an adult with disorganized attachment who experiences dissociative states. This leads to the child having unresolved states of mind. So often they don't really even understand their own state of mind because they didn't have a caregiver. They could never really be stable enough in a caregiver relationship to understand their own states of mind. The parent had a pervasive disrupted effective communication, or the caregiver child relationship. The affective communication was very disrupted. So when the child tried to communicate their attachment needs, the parent may have just immediately distracted the child and go to something else. So there wasn't even really an acknowledgement a lot of the time of the child's attachment needs. And this disorganized attachment develops when the source of comfort for the child was also the source of fear. So the person who was supposed to comfort them, or maybe even sometimes did, was the person they were also very afraid of. So you can imagine trying to seek comfort from someone who hurts you, or who you are extremely scared of. The child often develops strategies that keep the caregiver connected to them. So you can imagine that these strategies for getting attention, getting attachment needs met from the caregiver were severely dysfunctional. And if this carries in, this becomes their attachment style in adulthood, is often playing out these ways of getting attachment needs met from other people that are very disruptive and dysfunctional. And this can be a huge range of things, but a lot of times in adulthood, we're looking at things like self-harming in order to get attention from attachment, get their attachment needs met. So attention-seeking behaviors and just extreme impulsivity, things that force the caregiver, or in adult life, force other people to meet this person's attachment needs. And then um, eventually the child can take attachment and exploratory behavior offline. So um, they just kind of stop and aren't engaging in a lot of self development or um, safe, secure learning and exploring of the world um, because of this dysregulated state that they're always in. So, the therapeutic stance that we take, or that the three pillars takes with people with disorganized attachment, is one of calm, soothing, and reassurance. So, a calm, soothing, reassuring presence to dampen that fear arousal. Because that person in therapy is going to show up a lot of the times in the same way, where they are very fearful of um, their fear arousal goes from like 0 to 100 when things happen in the therapeutic relationship. The therapist needs to be strongly present, um, and the therapist needs to be very confident, very proactive, and determined to work this out with the client. And a lot of care should be taken for the therapeutic relationship to have as little disruptions as possible, which can be really difficult. So, but just being very conscious as the therapist of how things may be perceived given someone's disorganized attachment style. In ideal parent figures, we are looking at creating ideal parent figures because the client has very marked shifts in their states of mind. We're looking to create an ideal parent figure for each state of mind. So, this is the one attachment style where we are looking to create multiple ideal parent figures or multiple versions of an ideal parent figure. So we're looking to create ideal parent figures as both a safe haven and yet carefully attuned to the child's mistrust of that source of safety. One that encourages both attachment and exploratory behavior, that soothes the chronic fear arousal. The ideal parent figure should be fiercely protective around abuse themes. So, creating an ideal parent figure that stands up to bullies, does not allow the inner child to be abused, is very protective because that person with a disorganized attachment did not have that. And that is very important for them to create an ideal parent figure in this model that does that for them. Ideal parent figures should be able to stimulate the full range of a child's affective states to counter emotional numbness. So there should be one that is able to engage with any type of way that the inner child would feel. Ideal parent figure needs to be fully present, very, very attuned, and real, and support exploratory behavior. So being very supportive of self-development, and just learning about self and about the world. Being continuously, contingently responsive. So is able to respond to any mental state or affective state of the inner child. That sets appropriate limits and contains the child during aggression arousal. So when the inner child is displaying that fear arousal and that intense aggression, the ideal parent figure, or that version of the ideal parent figure, should be able to set limits and contain that. And then the ideal parent figure needs to be the epitome of consistency and predictability. On to how we can foster collaborativeness in the disorganized client. We need to be highly aware of transference and counter-transference in therapy. So the client has a longing for connection and a longing to seek attachment, but a severe mistrust of that attachment. And so just the therapeutic relationship, the client can be very internally triggered by the fear of closeness to the therapist, and can also display an intense anger at the therapist when they perceive either when they're starting to get close or when they perceive a disruption in therapy. So there needs to be, I will say, I have said this in the past, but there are a lot of therapists who, simply because of the transference and the countertransference, cannot work with this type of client because it brings up too much reactivity in themselves from their own attachment issues, or the things that they've gone through, whatever it might be. This requires someone who is very skilled at working with this type of client without arousing their own reactivity, and being able to walk away and realize that this is not your stuff. What's happening in the reactivity of the client is a part of their treatment and not something to take on. And this is really about fostering nonverbal collaborativeness. So if the client does something in therapy, not stonewalling, and helping the client not to stonewall, and then addressing a pervasive mismatch in nonverbal behavior. So there's going to be a lot of non-collaborative nonverbal behavior in the client. And then also fostering mentalization or metacognition awareness of verbal non-collaboration. So when we're looking at metacognition / mentalization in working with the disorganized client, we're looking at enhancing their reflective capacity, fostering an awareness of their the organization slash disorganization of their states of mind. Um, Working on mentalization of their orientation to past or present, self or other, and child or adult. Such as asking them, and we kind of talked about this in the Anxious Preoccupied, but asking them, like, how much are you in the past right now? How much are you in the present right now? And really getting down to the mentalization of each aspect of what's going on. And then taking a wider perspective of self to a larger unity, rather than their momentary shifting of self states. So, disorganized attachment, these people are often shifting very rapidly between their own internalized states. And so fostering a purpose to life, a meaning to life, goals for overall for their relationships, just improving things in general, and a connection with other people, using mentalization to help them gain a wider perspective on these rapidly shifting states in relation to how this is affecting how they show up in relationships, how they show up in the world, so on and so forth. So, that is all of my notes. I do have some of the scripts that I have written for the ideal parent figure visualization exercises or imagery sessions. But what I have here is literally just copy pasted from that course I took under the attachment project. And so I would love to at some point make a video for each, just so that if anyone wanted to at home listen to one of them, and you don't mind my voice, listen to one for whatever your attachment style is, just so you can get an idea of what that would be. I might do that, but I would probably, and it would take a little bit to kind of redo them in my own voice, in my own wording, in my own conceptualization of the ideal parent figure for each attachment style. But if that is something you would be interested in, just leave a comment or send me a message, and then I'll know. I can kind of decide whether I'm going to do that or not based on interest. But that is all I have for today. I know that this was a long live and it was very clinical in nature, but I hope that some of you enjoyed it and you found it useful. Give me a 1 or a thumbs up or a comment or something if you are interested in me going into the signs and symptoms of each attachment style in another live. So going into what each of the attachment styles would look like practically when someone is an adult, and what are some of the signs that you might have a certain attachment style. So anyways, I hope you all have a great Friday. And if you have any suggestions for topics in future lives, just let me know and I will put them on my list of possible topics. So have a great Friday. See you next week. Bye.